Finally, the Ministry of Defense of the Russian Federation broke its silence on the beginning of the counteroffensive of Russian troops in the Kursk region, and gave the first official comments on the events in this Russian region. So, a few minutes ago, the Ministry of Defense of the Russian Federation officially announced that within 48 hours, the soldiers of the group of troops under the designation SEVER had completely liberated 10 settlements in the Kursk region. Thus, the Russian military department officially recognized that the Russian army had launched a full-scale offensive in the Kursk region. According to official data, within 2 days Russian troops liberated such settlements as 10 October, Snagist, Olbakovka, Krasno-Oktyabrskoye, Gordievka, Nezhepnoye, Viktorovka, Vishnevka, Byakovo, and Apanasovka. At the same time, according to war correspondents, the number of liberated settlements by Russian troops is much higher. War correspondents claim that the Russian Defense Ministry will announce the liberation of these settlements in the coming days, after the completion of the cleanup. Moreover, war correspondents estimated that over the past 48 hours, the Ukrainian army has lost 150 square kilometers of controlled territory in the Kursk region. At the same time, it is worth recognizing that these figures are changing rapidly. It is reported that almost every hour, the Ukrainian army units lose controlled territories and continue to retreat from their positions. Moreover, it became known that the Russian troops also managed to close the cauldron in the Vishnevka-Krasno-Oktyabrskoye area. It is reported that quite large Ukrainian forces remained in this cauldron. It is reported that they did not manage to escape. Against this backdrop, in order to rescue Ukrainian forces that found themselves in a cauldron, the commander-in-chief of the armed forces of Ukraine, General Zelensky, attempted to attack Russian troops from the rear. So, on September 11, at 5 a.m. Moscow time, a battalion of the 154th Separate Mechanized Brigade of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, supported by dozens of heavy equipment, including 3 German Leopard tanks, invaded the border settlements of Medveziet and Novyi Put. However, it seems that the Russian generals knew that against the backdrop of the successful offensive of Russian troops in the Kursk region, the enemy would attempt to attack the Russian army units from the rear. So, unfortunately for the Ukrainian High Military Command, the battalion of the 154th Separate Mechanized Brigade of the Armed Forces of Ukraine was completely stopped by Russian troops in the settlements of Novyi Put and Medvezhai. It is reported that having lost 60 soldiers and 20 pieces of heavy equipment, including 2 German Leopard tanks, the battalion of the 154th Separate Mechanized Brigade of the Armed Forces of Ukraine was forced to retreat with heavy losses. Commenting on the unsuccessful attempt of the 154th Separate Mechanized Brigade of the Armed Forces of Ukraine to break through the Russian border in a new section, Russian telegram channels noted that this brigade is considered one of the most elite in the Ukrainian army. According to them, this is a real NATO brigade, armed not only with German Leopard tanks, but also with the most modern Western weapons. In addition, active duty soldiers and officers of NATO armies are also fighting in this brigade. The 154th Separate Mechanized Brigade of the Armed Forces of Ukraine also contains high-ranking NATO officers, who are directly involved in the organization and management of military operations of this brigade. Thus, it can be stated with confidence that it was NATO that tried to help the Armed Forces of Ukraine in the Kursk region, with its attempt to break through the Russian border in a new area. Against this backdrop, it is worth noting that Western analytical centers ignored the unsuccessful attempt of the 154th Separate Mechanized Brigade of the Armed Forces of Ukraine to break through the Russian border in a new area. However, military experts from Western analytical centers admitted that the counteroffensive of Russian troops in the Kursk region is only the beginning of big problems for the armed forces of Ukraine. According to them, the Russian army has not yet used all its might in the Kursk region. Western experts claim that everything that is now happening in the Kursk region is just an attempt by the Russian army to probe the capabilities of the armed forces of Ukraine. And the fact that the Ukrainian army managed to lose dozens of settlements in the Kursk region within 48 hours, once again convinced the Russian high military command that the armed forces of Ukraine were weak, even despite unprecedented support from the North Atlantic Alliance. Military experts from Western analytical centers are confident that the Russian army intends to divide in half the territory controlled by the Ukrainian troops in the Kursk region, and only after that Russian army will begin the systematic destruction of Ukrainian forces. Meanwhile, an insider at the General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine said that Russian troops are preparing to strike at the positions of the Ukrainian army units in Lyubimovka. According to him, General Gerasimov is preparing a large cauldron for the Ukrainian army in the Kursk region, hitting the positions of the Ukrainian troops in Lyubimovka from 3 directions at once, from Olgovka, Snagist, and Obukovka. Against this backdrop, even the pro-government Ukrainian telegram channels began to admit that the military operation of the armed forces of Ukraine in the Kursk region had suffered a crushing fiasco. According to them, Russian troops are destroying the positions of the Ukrainian army in the Kursk region almost non-stop, creating so-called mini cauldrons for Ukrainian troops, as a result of which Ukrainian soldiers are forced to surrender en masse. According to preliminary data, over the past 2 days, Russian troops have captured more than 200 Ukrainian soldiers and so-called foreign mercenaries from NATO countries. And this figure continues to grow rapidly almost every day. Meanwhile, official Kiev until recently tried not to comment on the successful counteroffensive of the Russian army in the Kursk region. However, today, Western journalists still forced the head of the Kiev regime to comment on the events in the Kursk region. So, speaking to journalists, Vladimir Zelensky still admitted that the Russian army went on the offensive in the Kursk region. However, this comic actor added that everything that is happening now is allegedly part of Ukraine's plan. Independent military experts have already reacted to Zelensky's words. According to them, Vladimir Zelensky is in a very bad situation. His army is suffering a major defeat both in Kursk and the Donbass. There is fear in his eyes, and he really doesn't know what he is saying. Against this backdrop, experts expressed confidence that by the end of this year, Vladimir Zelensky will be forced to flee to the United States, along with his ministers and even generals.